From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's now time for the fastest and hardest hitting hour in radio, Pull No Punches Radio. Pull No Punches Radio is powered by the Enlisted Nine Fight Company and brought to you exclusively by the Tan Talk Radio Network. Join UFC legend Chris Lights Out Lytle, Enlisted Nine Fight Company founder Dan O'Brien, and media mogul Jay Pagliaro, along with recurring guest Colton Smith for the next hour as we deliver up-to-the-second news, rumors, and discussions from the world of mixed martial arts and sports. And now, here are your hosts, Chris, Dan, and Jay.
I wish I knew then what I know right now. When my parents split, that's when it shook my ground. No source of strength now, my life was unclear.
Good Saturday morning to you, Tampa Bay, and welcome to Tan Talk's only MMA sports talk radio show. Pull No Punches Radio, powered by the Enlisted Nine Fight Company. Jay Pagliaro, Chris Lytle, Dan O'Brien with you here for the next hour as we discuss all happenings in the world of mixed martial arts and sports. Telephone number to call is 727-441-3000 or 866-826-1340. Chime on board. Feel free to jump on with us as we discuss all the happenings from mixed martial arts and, of course, the world of sports. Now, some of the topics we're going to discuss today, obviously the Seattle Seahawks, your Super Bowl 48 champions, a dominant, decisive win. We'll break that game down in full. Also, we'll discuss UFC 169, what's next for those gentlemen, and possibly talk some NBA and Major League Baseball if time permits us. But we would be absolutely remiss if we didn't start off with this first story. The absolute disturbing situation that took place Thursday night in South Florida in Broward County involving UFC light heavyweight Thiago Silva. But before we go into that story, though, I want to introduce my co-host here today, first and foremost, Enlisted Nine Fight Company founder and owner, Dan O'Brien. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Joe. How are you doing this morning, buddy?
Doing good, my man. Doing good. And obviously, Chris Lytle getting ready to call in here momentarily. He is at a wrestling meet as we speak, so I'm going to be patching him in here on the call, get him on this program momentarily. But Dan, I want the program though. First and foremost, before we discuss all the Silva situation, give us some rundowns. I mean, there's been a lot of great happenings in the Enlisted Nine family. Some shirts, some fighters fighting. Take the next couple of minutes, if you could, and break down what's going on here with Enlisted Nine.
Well, this evening we got Manny Wallow. He's getting ready to go into the cage this evening for CFFC up in New Jersey. He's on weight, so we're real proud of him. We're waiting to see the results of that. And he's walking in there with that bleed red, white, blue shirt. Very excited for this young soldier, turned professional, and he's going to do some great things. We also just released a couple new shirts, and things are going great.
Good to hear it, man. I mean, obviously, Enlisted Nine on the rise. Feel free to check them out now, www.enlisted9.com, or on Facebook at Enlisted Nine Fight Company, or at Enlisted Nine on Twitter. That being said, I'm going to also introduce our co-host here as well, Chris Lights Out Lytle, currently on location at regional wrestling tournaments in Indiana. Chris, what's going on, my friend?
Just here wrestling. We've been up here since about 6 o'clock this morning, so that's Eastern Standard Time, so I've been here for quite a while.
Always on the grind. So tell us real quick. I mean, last week you were at another meet. You guys are at the regionals this week. First and foremost, I guess a lot of people want to know, what's the name of the team that you coach, the school, the organization that you coach, and so give us some names, some information about what's been going on with you guys, team-wise, and how they've been doing.
I coach the New Palestine Dragons, and it's just a local high school right by where I live. Didn't go there or anything. It's just when I moved to that place, I went in there and started working out with the guys. So it kind of helped me out for MMA, and just went with the bigger guys, and I've been helping out ever since then. So we're a pretty good team. Actually, we got second in the sectional, which qualifies us to be in the team state next year. So pretty excited about that. It's got a lot of good wrestlers. We got a guy who won last year, won the state tournament, and a guy who got third. So looking to build on that, continue to produce some good young men, trying to help, produce good people, and as well as maybe if we can send some people to professional realms of fighting.
Obviously, Chris, I don't want to single anybody out because wrestling a team effort, and you don't want to make anybody feel bigger than the other. But who's some of the ones to you that really stand out that we should pay attention to? I know you said you're looking to move one to the possible realms of professional fighting. Who are some of the names that you really have your eye on there that we should keep an eye on?
There's a kid who's on our team. His name is C.J. Red, and he was undefeated state champion as a freshman last year, sophomore this year. So very much looking forward to seeing how his career progresses, and I'm definitely pretty positive he'll be going somewhere for college to wrestle. But those are the type of kids. That's how the sport's turning nowadays. Look at a lot of the contenders and the good athletes are really becoming the good fighters at the next level. So whoever's gonna be the champion 170 in the future probably gonna have some college wrestling. And the guys who are really being dominant are the people who are actually like national champion type guys. So.
Awesome. Well, those are a few names. Again, pay attention to these names. And again, the Dragons wrestling team, we'll keep you posted on all the happenings here. As Chris Lytle gets them, he is going to be on location, so he may drop periodically, but we'll try to get as much up-to-date information. And if we don't do it this week, we'll definitely report it next week. Now, speaking of people with bright futures, we're going to go opposite side of that. And somebody that really is future, obviously, is in doubt, so to speak, non-existent. And we're going to discuss the just absolute disheartening story that took place Thursday night in South Florida, in Broward County, involving Thiago Silva. Now, just a quick synopsis for those of you that aren't in the loop of what's going on. Again, current UFC light heavyweight Thiago Silva arrested Thursday night following a standoff with the Oakland Park, Florida's the Sheriff's Department SWAT team. 4-hour basic hostage situation, calling it lack of a better term, a 4-hour standoff with the police following a disturbing situation at Pablo Popovich's gym in South Florida. He shows up and reportedly all sorts of stuff coming out about this gentleman. I mean, that Pablo, he was angry that Pablo is having an affair with his wife. His wife threatens to shoot up the entire gym, threatens to shoot Pablo, leads to this standoff situation, gets arrested, released by the UFC, now in jail without bond because they believe, A, he's a flight risk, and B, he's a serious danger to do something to, drastic even more so. I mean, Dan O'Brien, what a tragic situation in terms of, all the people affected by that. Thank God nobody was killed and everybody's still alive. But what a discouraging situation. And suffice to say right now, despite what some people are arguing otherwise, Thiago Silva's career is over, and that's the least of his problems.
Oh, yeah, my opinion on it, Jay, is me being a law enforcement guy, I'm going to wait till all the facts come out and everything. But it's obviously something big going on there. We all know that. He's apprehended right now. He's sitting in the jail. But, the thing that's really unfortunate about the whole thing is this is the last thing we needed in our sport right now, especially of this magnitude. I mean, we're used to a couple DUIs once in a while or a little CRT popping off or something like that. Well within the parameters of the normal stuff that happens in all sports across America. But I think this is a devastating blow. I think Dana White did the right thing by eliminating him from the UFC, or at least suspending him. I don't know exactly all the exact facts on that. But I really hope that this doesn't tarnish what guys like Chris and everybody else has done in the mixed martial arts community. And, let's just hope for the best that this goes way fast.
I mean, Chris, what obviously I think you were still in the UFC when Thiago just was breaking in, or, you had some interactions, I'm sure, with Thiago in your time. What are your thoughts on this whole situation? And do you think that Dana White did right by releasing this guy? I mean, do you think Dana White was justified? Because some people in the MMA community are arguing otherwise.
I think he did do the right thing. I mean, unfortunately, with this sport, you're still looking for validity and trying to get the idea that we're not Neanderthals and wanting to go out there. This is a typical thing that people might think, that's a crazy guy. You might be willing to put a gun in his girlfriend's mouth. That's a typical fighter. We don't want that to be the image of the fighter. A lot of guys are college-educated, well-spoken, good athletes. They're just good athletes. They're like an athlete just like any other sport. So I think Dana, he's kind of well-known when you go to the UFC. They're not going to tolerate that type of thing. And if you're going to have problems like this, you don't belong in this organization. So I think from his standpoint, that's always been his stance, and that's always going to be their stance. I mean, they're not going to deal with that type of individual. They don't want that reputation, so they're going to do whatever they can to protect their reputations as well as they can.
Now, I'm gonna say, and this may be an unpopular opinion with some of the MMA fans, but I know a lot of them have used this as a platform to bash Dana White, bash EOT. Dana had no choice. I mean, what is Dana supposed to do here? Is he supposed to shrug his shoulders, pretend it didn't happen? Oh, no big deal. This guy basically did, threaten his wife, threaten 25 people. I mean, that's borderline terroristic threat in a 4-hour standoff with the police. Okay, I know everybody likes to, the passe thing is to bash Dana White for everything he does. And listen, I'm by no means a 100% apologist of everything that Dana White does, but you're talking a severe criminal matter here. He can't exactly turn the other cheek, especially when, yes, image is everything. I mean, image is everything in this sport. And I've heard people compare it to Michael Vick. Michael Vick got a second chance. I'm sure Thiago Silva will too when he gets released from jail, if he's released any time in his prime. But, right, the difference between Michael Vick and Thiago Silva, Michael Vick did his time. Whether you like it, you hate it, you dislike the fact that he's making the American dream happen after getting out of jail. To me, that's not the crux of this conversation. The man is out of jail. Thiago Silva's in jail. When he's getting out, who knows? I mean, to me, just this ridiculous concept that, Dana White should have kept him under contract, it's lunacy. It's ludicrous. And, yes, I know innocent until proven guilty. Go ahead.
Just what you're saying, and I don't care if this guy was in the NBA, the NHL, NFL. If he does that, he's going to get released. I mean, they're going to release him. They might sign him later. That's not saying that. But immediately they're going to say, hey, you're done. And they have to do that to kind of, shield themselves for whatever political damage might be coming their way. So everybody's going to do that. And once again, if they can, rehabilitate themselves and prove that, this is not them anymore, then they can get a second chance. But I think anybody's going to cut somebody after that. It doesn't matter what organization you are. Hey, guys, I hate to do this, but I got to take off for a little bit, go coach with a couple of people. I'll be back later.
Sounds good, Chris. We'll talk to you in a few. All right. Now, I'm going to throw for those that don't think that the UFC or, those that don't think that this happens in other sports. I got 2 words for you. Aaron Hernandez. I mean, Aaron Hernandez will also get innocent until proven guilty. Murder charges coming his way. Dan, when it was first announced that the Patriots were releasing him, he wasn't even a suspect in the murder. He was a suspect, but he wasn't formally tabbed. This happens in all sports because, again, sports, public image, and realistically, MMA, specifically the UFC, is under a big spotlight because they're still trying to prove themselves it's come a long way in 7, 8, 10 years, but there's still people out there that are waiting for this sport to crumble. There's still people out there that are going to use what Thiago Silva did and say, look, this is what this sport's all about. Is that unfair? Absolutely. Thiago Silva's one fighter on a roster of 400 plus, in a sport that has 10,000 fighters in it. But to the ignorant who don't like this sport, who don't understand what this sport's all about, who are anti-MMA, they're going to use this as a perfect outlet to jump the sport, to criticize and critique the sport. And if the UFC kept him under roster, what kind of backlash would Dana White have got? I mean, you've got a guy who, as of 8 o'clock yesterday morning, was in prison facing attempted murder charges. I mean, what kind of message do you people that didn't want Silva to be cut, what kind of message do you think that the UFC would send? And what do you think Dana White should have done? I mean, I don't know, Dan. I'm just I'm soapboxing it here, I realize. And, again, I'm all about what you said, being a former police officer, doing what you do in the law enforcement realm. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty, and we certainly don't want to hang an innocent man. But right now, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, there's enough factual information. I'm going to support Dana White 100% on this. I know people are all going to have, the naysayers are all going to have an opinion. But here's the deal, and everybody needs to understand this, and I'll go right on the record with it. It's about image. It's about building an organization. It's about the integrity of, basically the way you function. It's the way you are as an individual. So when you work so hard to establish a program like the UFC or any other sport in that matter, you cannot take these blows on the chin, and in this case, a body blow or whatever, almost a knockout punch, if all the facts are true and they all come out. So the right thing to do what Dana did. You have to cut ties with this because the image is already there for the UFC. But you got to stop the bleeding. And right now, what Dana did, he basically just put a Band-Aid on a second chest wound because this thing isn't going away anytime soon based off of what took place. And what the other issue is there's terroristic threats here. I mean, we have weapons. We have children. We have students in a jiu-jitsu studio that could have been, injured. So, you're not looking at just somebody that was out there maybe doing a hit and run or something along those lines or DUI. This is severe, and you have got to keep your sport in check, and you have to make sure that all your fans and all your media coverage, whether it's Fox or pay-per-views and all these other organizations and sponsors, I mean, this could be a financially ruined situation if Dana didn't do what he did.
I agreed 100%. And anybody that wants to chime in on this, feel free to do so. 826-1340 or 727-441-3000. A couple of questions from the Pull No Punches inbox on Facebook, sent to me private directly. Russell wants to know, hey, listen, the guy's wife was cheating on him. Shouldn't we give him a free pass? Okay, number one, it's one thing. Listen, we're all men on this kind of show. I'm sure we've all had situations to where we felt emotionally compromised by something that's went on with women in our past. Okay, I know I have. Yeah, I'm mad. And you find out your woman's cheating on you. Yeah, you're mad. Do you want to go beat the crap out of the guy who did it to you? That brought about this pain and angst. We've all been there at one point or another. That's not unnatural to be mad, to be angry, to be PO'd. But to go to a gym with an AK-47, again, reportedly, to go to a gym with an AK-47 and threaten to shoot up the entire building, to stick a gun in your wife's mouth or the woman's mouth, well, that's not normal. That's not normal behavior. I mean, mad, yes. I'll even go a step further, Dan. If he goes to the gym, pulls Pablo aside and says, even if he pulls Pablo outside and says, we're going to fight, and he beats the crap out of him. Okay, I'm willing to give him a free pass for that. Do I encourage that sort of behavior? No. I mean, we're grown adults. You're a professional. You've got to handle yourself accordingly and take the high road. But I'm willing to look the other way if that happens, if that's how it went down, or they go on the gym, they have a hard sparring session, and Thiago puts a beating on him. Cool. That's, it's handled, whatever, it's done. What Thiago Silva did is not the realm of anger. And Russell, I thank you for the comment, but this isn't the realm of anger. This is the drastic extreme. These are law-abiding citizens. There's things we can't do, and we can't stick guns to people's heads or threaten to shoot up 25 people, 24 of them, 23 of them who are innocent, because our wives are screwing around on us.
Yeah, you bring up great points there, Jay. I mean, this took it to the extreme, as we all know. Everybody has coping mechanisms. Everybody deals with things differently, but this was the extreme. And I just think at this point, we've talked about it, I think almost even enough. It's a great conversation we're having, but the thing about it is we know that Dana and the UFC did the right thing, as all other sports have done. And I think what we'll do is we'll just wait to see how the case unfolds. And I think we're very objective in this, and I think people will appreciate it, as well as the UFC, that we stand behind them on this. And, like Chris said, when it's all said and done, if he can recover, he'll be back in the UFC perhaps, or another fight promotion, and we'll see him fight because he's a pretty good fighter, as we all know. But, hey, this is just, basically unacceptable, I think, for any sport or any individual, not even in sport.
Agreed. And another comment to the Pull No Punches inbox. Nick says he'll be signed by World Series of Fighting or Bellator by next week. Mark my words. Not a chance, dude. Not a chance. I'll tell you right now. I'm gonna go on record and say this. If Bellator World Series of Fighting signs Thiago Silva next week, I'll surrender this show forever. I will never do this show again. That's how confident I am that that's not happening. Nobody's touching Thiago Silva as long as this case is going on. And believe me, it's not going away anytime soon. Anyway, real quick, speaking of breaking legal news, Bill, you told me right as the program actually began, our board up here, Mr. Bill, the technical director here who runs this show every Saturday, he said, let me know that a member of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers apparently is in hot water with the law himself. What do we got, Bill? Do you have any details, names,
His name
information?
is Michael Williams, 26, faces 2 misdemeanor charges for trespassing and criminal mischief.
Jeez. So Mike Williams, and we're talking to wide receiver, ultra-talented wide receiver. sadly, this isn't Mike Williams' first brush with the law either. I mean, so got a couple of misdemeanors. That's an interesting case. We'll have to research that a little bit more, and we'll discuss it more here on next week's show. But there's some breaking news. According to Mr. Bill, Mike Williams, a wide receiver, arrested with a couple of misdemeanor charges. Boy, poor guy, his rap sheet just continues to grow. As talented on the field as he is, he's had problems with him off him. So hopefully that he can get this and get his life back in order. Speaking of football, we'll use that as a segue, Dan, to talk about something a little more positive. If you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, it's more positive. If Denver fan, not so much. And that was last Saturday. It was last Sunday's Super Bowl 48, the game that perhaps the most anticipated one in recent memory. You had the number one ranked offense versus the number one ranked defense. You had Russell Wilson versus Peyton Manning. You had storylines galore. On paper, Dan, this game looked like it was everything you wanted in a Super Bowl, and then some. It truly, on paper, had all the trimmings to be a game for the ages. Unfortunately, that game for the ages ended on paper. Seattle just dominates this football game, literally from the opening snap from scrimmage. The Seahawks took control of this game. The muff snap to Manning leads to a safety, the fastest score in Super Bowl history. And from there, I mean, that was a telling sign of things to come for Denver. The muff snap, the safety. Denver just never got into this game, was never on board. And Seattle just dominated them. 43-8 is the final score. I mean, what were your assessments on this game as a whole? What were your thoughts on this game? Was it as surprising to you as it was to me?
Well, I'll tell you, Jay, the mental errors cost this Super Bowl from being perhaps one of the best ones. I mean, as far as on paper. The muff snap, that's 2 points. Not such a big deal, but, there was a lot of momentum off of that. We all know that, Those young kids over in Seattle were like playing for drafts, like trying to get drafted, it seemed like. They were playing so hard. They had such a chip on their shoulder. And I think what happened is, and then the next play, when they returned the kick out of the end zone, it gets to, I think, the 11 or 12-yard line. Those are two big plays that I thought shaped the entire game because, you can see Denver. They were dejected right away. And Seattle just tromped on them. I mean, they seized the moment. And then once Seattle started to, understand that Denver was down, great coaching by Pete Carroll and his staff, they just put the pressure on even more after that. So if that muff snap, that snap doesn't happen, I think it's a better football game. I really believe in the momentum shift, especially playing a lot of football myself. Certain things are supposed to happen in your game plan, and when they don't, and your guys don't, recover from it, it just sets up the conditions for the rest of the game. And if you look, Denver's defense, everybody was dogging Denver's defense, but they were on the field for like 15, 16 minutes of the first 20 minutes of that game. So they really kept them in the game. But the offense just couldn't get anything going. There was just no momentum, and it just ended up being just a horrible game.
And, the frightening thing is, Dan, as bad of a beating as it was for Denver, you hit the nail right on the head with the time of possession that Seattle just dominated in that first half, specifically the first quarter. I mean, this game very easily could have been a lot worse. I mean, you're talking, Seattle had it twice in the first half inside the first and goal. This game could have been 36-0 at halftime. Okay, this game 43-8. You're talking. I mean, it could have been a heck of a lot worse. It could have been just so Denver. I mean, it could have been even more nightmarish for them. But to me, I mean, Seattle. What can you take away from this? They just dominated from start to finish. The fastest score in Super Bowl history. Here's another telling stat for you, Dan. They scored the only team in Super Bowl history. Okay, the only team in Super Bowl history, and the second team in NFL history. Keep this in mind to score some capacity in the first 12 seconds of both halves. Okay, so they scored in the first 12 seconds of both the first and second half with the safety, and then Percy Harvin's punt return for a touchdown. It was that decisive. It was that easy. It almost looked like they made Denver, the best team in the AFC, look amateurish. And I mean, it just was a beating. And for Peyton Manning, it's just another postseason heartbreak. I mean, it's another postseason disappointment. It's another postseason letdown. This one may sting the most, Dan, because on paper, this was, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, the greatest regular season statistically we will ever see. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you did from from September to January. If you don't take home the trophy, if you don't take home the big one, it's almost all forgotten.
Yeah, and you know what, Jay? We're not going to take one thing away from Seattle, because I tell you what, they showed up and they played like nobody's business. They hit it in all facets of the game. So, hey, kudos to them. Great coaching staff, great players. They did a great job. But just the momentum that Denver could just never get. Peyton Manning, I mean, he had his chances, but even when they made plays, his guys fumbled the ball, and then he threw a bad interception. It's just everything you could possibly have gone wrong in that first half and into the third quarter. It happened, and they could just never get it back going again.
No, they couldn't. And it's just that, I mean, when you just get hit that many times, and things just aren't going your way, and really nothing was for Denver. It's hard to place blame on one people. And people, by the way, speaking of, please stop with the lunacy, saying that Tim Tebow would have done better. That's asinine, okay? I mean, Peyton Manning, no, it wasn't his better performance. The guy did set a Super Bowl record for most completions, okay? The guy, he threw for almost 300 yards in one of his worst performances of the season. Tim Tebow would not have done better. Okay, matter of fact, the closest Tim Tebow would have been to the Super Bowl was in the T-Mobile commercial he was in. Listen, you can't just pin this on Peyton Manning. I know it's passé and easy to do, and I know the spotlight was heavily on him because what he did in 2013's regular season and in the two other playoff games. Because of his past transgressions in postseason success or lack thereof. This wasn't on Peyton Manning. I'm sorry. When your defense isn't stopping Seattle on third down. I mean, Seattle, Dan, their first 7 drives, they won 6 out of 7 on third down. That's not Peyton Manning. Okay, I'm sorry. When Noshawn Moreno, Monty Ball, and the halfbacks in Denver couldn't get 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, that's not on Peyton Manning either. Okay, I mean, when the only offensive weapon that actually showed up to play that game, along with Manning, was Demaryius Thomas, that's not on Peyton Manning. Saying Tim Tebow would have done differently, would have done better, that they would have won, no, not even close.
Well, I think, Jay, what you got to take into consideration, though, okay, you still got a lot of scar tissue from a couple of years ago there in Denver when Tim Tebow, I think it was a conference title when they beat Pittsburgh. Tebow had a great game, and then all of a sudden, the next season Tebow's out of there. So I think what you have now is you have the situation of, Tim Tebow. I see kind of in a way where the fans are going, not that they're right in any way, in my opinion. I think you hit it right on the head. But Tim Tebow did go into Denver. There was a resurgence that season. They did get into the playoffs. They went relatively deep. And I think what you got, though, is it's the John Elway syndrome. Maybe it's like the Babe Ruth of the Red Sox. Who knows? Will this hang over, Denver's head? Who knows? It's like the Cubs, right? So, there's a lot of sport teams out there. There's a lot of fans that are going to be the naysayers when, Peyton Manning can't get it done, but we've known that before he went to Denver. He's the best quarterback in the regular season, probably in the history. We all agree with that. And Tom Brady in the postseason is probably the current best quarterback, as we know. But I think there's a lot of Denver fans that they expected to win the Super Bowl, and then when they didn't win the Super Bowl, it's easy to lean back on Tim Tebow because essentially, it did go a game or two further, but they had an exciting guy. And me personally, I think they should have kept Tim Tebow under Peyton Manning, and I think he probably would have come out to be a pretty decent quarterback. That's just my opinion.
I agree. Listen, I'm the first to say I think Tebow was almost unfairly labeled in the NFL. You know what I mean? I think that there were some unfair labelings of the guy. I don't think the guy really got a fair shake. I mean, after he was traded from Denver, the Jets bring him in, and for reasons I'll never understand, refuse to play him. I mean, then he goes to New England this year. He goes to New England in the postseason. Picks up with them in training camp. But being perfectly honest, you've got Tom Brady, who's not going away this year. You've got Ryan Mallett, who many people feel is on the cusp of being ready to start himself. Where was Tim Tebow going to play? I mean, realistically speaking, I think still that there's a team out there that could use a Tim Tebow type player, that could use Tim Tebow. I think this is fine. I mean, maybe up in Jacksonville, Dan. I mean, I don't know. There's a team out there, though, that I think should give Tebow a shot, especially when you look at some of the level of quality quarterbacks that are in this league, that, you know, and how many quarterback-hungry teams that are going to be in this draft. Some team wouldn't be remiss to you know, give Tebow a shot. But my principle, though, is to say he would have done better against Seattle. I can't see it. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think Tom Brady would have done better against Seattle. I mean, it was just that I'm going to take it on Seattle. It was that decisive of a performance. They clicked on offense. They clicked on defense. Everything they did was right. And that was, you know, it was their time. Now, that being said, I got to ask, is this the end of is this Denver's window of opportunity? Has that window, Dan O'Brien, closed for good for the Broncos? How do they rebound from this?
It's going to be tough. I mean, free agency is going to be big. Obviously, they need a little bit of help in the defensive area if they can't stay healthy because, you know, with Von Miller, he seems to be, you know, injured, you know, half the season now, pretty much all the time. And he's, you know, the defense is getting old there with Champ Bailey. So I think they have to do some really good work in the draft or in the free agency market. You know, there's a lot of really good AFC teams that are coming around right now. And I don't think that's an easy walk next year. You know, New England's going to do they're going to do due diligence in the draft. And, you know, they'll be back. I mean, they were close this year. So I don't think anybody's going away. And then you got this, you know, you got to take Cincinnati and Indianapolis. So I'll be honest, I think what we just saw was Denver's probably their best shot at getting there. Peyton Manning's not getting any younger, although he had the best season. But it's a up and rising league right now in the AFC, and I think it's going to be very tough to outdo what they did this year.
It's going to be, to me, I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult. How does Manning possibly top the season he just had? I mean, is it possible? I don't know. I mean, you know, and then, like you said, you got teams that are on the rise, you know, teams that are there right now in New England. You got, I mean, let's be honest, Baltimore gets a wide receiver like, say, Mike Evans or a Kelvin Benjamin in the draft. Not far-fetched to think they'll be back in the hunt next year. You got Houston. I mean, whether it be Ted Bridgewater or Johnny Manziel or you know, Blake Bortles, you got to believe that may be the missing link to them getting back to the playoffs. Cincinnati, Indianapolis, rising San Diego, Kansas City. I mean, Miami's on the rise. You know, there's just a lot of teams in the AFC that are on the up and up. And, you know, I just can't help but wonder. I can't help but believe this is Denver's window of opportunity that just got slammed shut because, like you said, they're getting older on defense. They're going to likely suffer a big-time loss to their offense in this offseason as Eric Decker is a free agent. And, I mean, I don't think Denver's going to have the resources to pay him and bring him back, not when some team's going to open the bank for him. So, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to follow what happens with Denver from here. Now, on the flip side of that, Seattle, I mean, let's be blunt here. Let's take a look at what Seattle has going forward. This is one of the youngest teams in the NFL, Dan, and they're not going away anytime soon. I mean, could this be the start of a Seattle dynasty? I mean, dare I say, we haven't seen a team repeat Super Bowl wins since New England, who ironically was the last team to get go to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years. And I know that the NFC West is a pressure cooker. We'll discuss that in a few seconds here, but could this be the start of something special for Seattle? I mean, Russell Wilson in his second year won a Super Bowl. You can say what you will about him. Yeah, he's a clipboard carrier. Yeah, he's a guy who, manages a very good game. I disagree with that. But, you know, look at what he's done in year two, and he's only going to get better. This team's only going to get better as age comes. I think they're on the verge of something big.
You know, Jay, here's what I think we got to think about, though. You know, a lot of people are, you know, not understanding how good that conference is that Seattle plays in out in the West. You know, you got the 49ers and a really emerging Cardinals football team that, in my personal opinion, I think those three teams next year may do devastating damage to each other to where the dynasty may not be complete. Because you know Harbaugh's coming back with the 49ers. They're going to be back, and the Cardinals are getting better and better. So these teams might knock each other off, and we might have what we're used to seeing up there in the Central, up there in the NFC from years past, where you got the Bears, Green Bay, and the Vikings, you know, always beating each other off. So they're 9-7 wins the conference. But this dynasty is there, but I think they played a pretty dang tough division, and that might have an issue with, you know, Seattle getting back to where they were this year. because look how close those 49ers games were during the season and the Cardinal games.
Yeah. I mean, actually, to be technical, Arizona holds a win over. I mean, Arizona holds a win over Seattle in Seattle. I mean, and this is, mind you, this is a 10-16 that, I mean, you put Arizona, I'll be point blank, you put Arizona in, I don't want to say any of the other conferences, but I can name at least three right off the top of my head. If you stick Arizona in, they win that division going away. I mean, and there's the fourth team in this mix that we're not even talking about. That's the St. Louis Rams. I mean, yeah, the Rams, were last place at 7-9 this year. This is a team, Dan, that holds 2 first-round draft picks this year, the number 2 overall pick in the draft specifically. I mean, they've got some good young options on offense, weapon-wise. Tyvon Austin's got some serious upside. They got defensively, you got Chris Long, who is a beast in terms of sacks. You got Robert Quinn, who led the NFL in sacks. You got a good linebacking core with Laurinaitis and some of the other gentlemen there. I mean, the Rams. I mean, let's be honest. The Rams may be the little sisters of the poor in that division. It's not far-fetched. If they were a strong draft this year, they're not knocking on the door of the playoffs next year. And then, is it unrealistic to say we could have 4 teams in a 14 division with a 500 record or better? Absolutely. Absolutely. And Arizona, big news out here. I mean, you talk about them, they're 10-6. Larry Fitzgerald just restructured his contract earlier this week, giving the Cardinals some serious cap flexibility to go after a gentleman like Michael Oher or one of the offensive linemen, which is their biggest weakness. I mean, this is a division, folks, that 4 deep. I mean, 4 out of 4. They're 4 deep. There's no weak teams. So you're absolutely right. I mean, this could be the start of a Seattle run. For all we know, Seattle might miss the playoffs next year with 10 wins. I mean, who knows? That's the what do you call it? Like the next season after the Super Bowl. It happens so much that a lot of those teams don't even make it back to the playoffs, or at best they get into the wild card. So because of the way that division is structured, we may not. We might see Seattle go 10-6 next year and miss the playoffs. I'm going to tell you, it's all about the schedule. So we'll see in the spring when the schedules come out, and we'll see how all the matchups look. But Seattle's going to get the toughest bid out there, and those easy games, like you were saying with St. Louis, they picked up a couple defensive players, a couple offensive players in free agency, and with the 2 draft picks, we might be talking a totally different story here. Exactly. 727-441-3000, 866-826-1340. Your telephone number to call. Now, last week, also moving away from the Super Bowl, we also saw UFC 169 also take place in New Jersey. Saw 2 title bouts, saw a heavyweight bout. Suffice to say, though, Dan, this pay-per-view in a nutshell, and the event as a whole, they're just really, by no fault of anybody in the UFC, because it happens, but just really seemed to be lacking in certain categories. I mean, the oomph factor just wasn't there with this, and that's unusual to say because you got 2 of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport defending their titles, in Renan Barão and Jose Aldo, but there just something seemed to be missing on this event. I mean, obviously Trio and Varner, Abel Trio and Jamie Varner kicked off the festivities strong, but from there it just seemed to hit a fizzled brick wall. Yeah, I think Joe Silva and the UFC, they thought they had the greatest card lined up. And I'll tell you, after the Jamie Varner fight, it was all indications were going in that direction. And I'll tell you, the last 3 hours of that card, I don't know what happened, and I'm the biggest MMA fan in the world, but I'll tell you, I was just like stunned by it. It just didn't do anything for me, and that's really unfortunate. I don't know if it was just the way the matchups went, but it just seemed like nobody was in the right frame of mind, or the game plan just didn't come around or something. But I was lost for words, to be honest with you. I was sitting at a Buffalo Wild Wings wondering what just happened, because this should have been the greatest thing, I don't know, one of the greatest fights this year, fight cards. And I'll tell you what, I think 169, I think, is one of those that people are just going to want to go away. I agree. And Dana White, to his own credit, said the same thing. This was just I think he called it a beautiful disaster or something along those lines, but he wasn't very complimentary. I was the same way, Dan. I mean, I'm as diehard of an MMA fan as you'll meet. There were several times during this event I was looking at my watch. I mean, wondering, oh my God, is this, and that. I don't normally say that about events. And again, this isn't Joe Silva's fault. It's not the UFC's fault. they put together a very nice card. Sometimes the fights just don't deliver. I mean, and we'll start off, though, breaking down these fights. It started off, obviously, mentioned Trio Varner. We also saw a nice flyweight fight between Ali Bogdanov and John Lineker. But the one we're going to discuss to start with was a heavyweight battle. Alistair Overeem, Frank Mir. Looked like the proverbial loser leaves town fight between the two. It was all Alistair Overeem, though. I mean, Frank Mir was never able to get the game plan going. Overeem basically just dominates Mir. I think that strikes him something down like 135-5 the entire fight. Could not beat Mir by a one-sided unanimous decision. First and foremost, I got to ask two parts of this. Is this the end of the line for Frank Mir, do you think? Do you think that this is the end of the run for Mir, at least in the UFC?
I think Frank Mir has done a ton of great things for the UFC, for his motorcycle injury and being able to come back and become the world champion again in the heavyweight division. But it's kind of like the Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz story. You hang around too long, and then your reputation and your image as a fighter, not as a person and not of the great things you've done, but as a fighter, you become irrelevant because you no longer can perform. So everybody starts to forget about all the wonderful things you did because your loss record starts to build tremendously at that point. I think he needs to step away. I don't think he needs to go to another fight series. I think he needs to take those expertise, his great jiu-jitsu game, and, he basically has evolved stand-up. And he just needs to walk away from the game because his athleticism is not keeping up with his age.
I don't think the UFC is going to cut him. I mean, I know some people have suggested he's in danger of losing his job. I don't see it happening, Dan. I mean, this guy, this is the longest tenured UFC employee. He's been employed by the UFC continuously longer than anybody else. And I know some people say Vitor Belfort, some will say Robbie Lawler. Both of those gentlemen left and went to greener big before coming back. Frank Mir has been around since 2002. He's the longest tenured UFC employee. They're not going to fire him. By no means are they going to cut him. Are they going to give him another fight? No, I don't know, Dan. I don't see it. I mean, this is 3 straight losses for Mir where he's really, call it as it is, he's been dominated in all 3. Now, granted, there's no shame in losing to Danny Cormier. There's no shame in losing to any of the gentlemen he's lost to, but it's only going to go downhill from here for me. I mean, he's been beaten decisively. He's been dominated. And really, I think Alistair Overeem, who he was catching on the tail end, was his last chance. I mean, again, I don't think he's going to get cut. I just don't think they're going to give him another fight. I think the UFC is going to try to talk him into an office role like they gave Liddell and Hughes and, put him in financial security for life to where he doesn't need to fight anymore.
Yeah, I just love Frank Mir, and I mean, a lot of people say he's cocky, whatever, but I like him. I want him to go out on a high note. The fights are not going to get any easier. They're still all going off the Nogueira victory where he snapped his arm, but I mean, that's the last really thing he's done in there. Yeah, he did submit Brock, but let's just be honest, that heel hook, knee bar, he was basically done in that fight. And even with those kind of fights, he's having a hard time with. Alistair Overeem took this fight. He was so safe. He didn't want to burn his tank out, and he just did not. He could have finished Frank Mir. We all know that. But Overeem was fighting his own demons that night. He just needed a victory to get back on track. So this could have been really bad for Frank Mir if Overeem really would have took it to him, and we all know this. The fight was relatively boring, even though Overeem was just having his way with him. So I think it's time to go. I know Dana probably won't tell him, that they're going to cut him or anything. That's not it. That's not the question. It's just a time when a fighter has to come to realization that, I'm just not there anymore.
I mean, the question I suppose looms, and maybe we could save this for another broadcast, but what's the difference between one fight too soon and one fight too many? I mean, that's something I'd love to talk with Chris about, because you're talking about a guy who walked out really on the highest of high notes at the peak of his career. Chris still could have fought another 2 or 3 years, in my opinion, and, decided to walk out. But then you got situations like here where we're left asking ourselves, has he hung on one fight too long? We'll never know. I mean, only Frank Mir can answer that question. And maybe we'll get some insight from Chris on that next week. But, speaking of Overeem, though, next for him, I mean, obviously he goes and he calls out Brock Lesnar, which was a little bit humorous. I mean, that's almost like you get beat up by a bully so much, you stand up, you beat up, so you finally beat the bully up, but then you call out the guy that you used to bully. I mean, we're not going to see a Brock Lesnar over Ring 2. I mean, number one, Brock Lesnar at this point is probably not coming back to MMA. Dana White went on record and said that himself, but why call out somebody you've already beat decisively? I mean, you just got a big win over a former two-time heavyweight champion. Aim high, Grasshopper, aim high.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the draw, Jay. Brock Lesnar, as you know, that's going to be, if he comes back, that's a huge pay-per-view for Overeem. Big $4 a buy probably at that on the side. So not only is his check going to be larger, but, it makes him a more popular fighter because it's not necessarily the best guy to fight. But as far as popularity, it probably is a bigger payday.
I got a question.
Yeah.
What's the big reality fight that's coming up between the guy who what was the guy who shot Trayvon Martin? What's that guy's name?
Oh, George Zimmerman and DMX. Yeah, that's just and there's a vulgar word I'm going to use that has cluster at the beginning of it. Yeah, that's going to be it all day, every day. That's going to be it all day, every day.
That's going to be a crazy match, ain't it? I don't even think that should be put on the air. Do you?
Why are we? That's what I want. Why are we celebrating a murderer? I mean, seriously, why are we giving this guy media spotlight?
Yeah, that's what I say.
I think it's asinine. I mean, and then they're going to put it in this boxing stratosphere. I made some jokes on my Facebook page. You want to fight? Let's do it MMA. Come on, dude. Seriously, are you? Is this sport that desperate and hard up for ratings outside of Mayweather and Pacquiao that they've got to reach and grab and put this sideshow fight between, which, by the way, I don't even need to begin to remind you has so many racial overtures to it. It's not even funny. I mean, come on, seriously, this is stupid. I mean, this is Bush League nonsensical crap. I mean, we all want to see George Zimmerman get his face crushed in, but come on, really? I mean, why bother? I mean, that's like, why are we celebrating? I mean, what are we going to have next? We can have Casey Anthony fight Tanya Harding. I mean, for real.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even gonna go there, Jay. You know the deal. Look what we did last week. We tried to keep a show, alive, and look what Discovery does to the series there with boxing. So I don't know what's going on with boxing, and I'm just frustrated with it.
Not even 5 days after we interview Matt Finney on this program, that show gets pulled. This is just a ratings grab, and it sucks. I don't like that crap. I mean, Dan, Bill, I think that's just why. Again, we're going to, this Zimmerman clown's going to get a fat payday because of it. I mean, he's going to get a nice little paycheck out of it. Hey, what message are we sending as a society? Let's make this idiot a celebrity. What are we doing? What the hell's wrong with this?
When are we going to get back to the the 1970s, like the old Muhammad Ali fighting days? Those were the great days.
Yeah, exactly. Thankfully,
I'll tell you, I think boxing was wonderful all the way up into the 90s. Myself,
yeah.
You can start talking Holyfield, Riddick Bowe fights. I mean, those were some of the greatest fights around. Tommy Morrison even brought some great fights. And then the Mike Tyson era of the 80s. I mean, George Foreman. Yeah, great fights. And then all of a sudden, everything goes away now. It just seems, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from the Klitschko's, but there's been a lot of great fights with the De La Hoyas and the lower weight classes. But if we're going to sit there and talk about boxing, heavies always brought the big paydays. And the Klitschko fights, there just hasn't been, they've had great fights, but they just haven't brought the excitement back to the sport like Holyfield, like Riddick Bowe, George Foreman, Moore, Mike Tyson. Those guys made boxing after the Spinks. If you remember, like, the Spinks brothers moving into the Tyson era, those were big fights. But then for the early 80s, it was always the Hagler, Hearns, and Leonard, and Roberto Duran. Those were the fighters that made boxing. And you know what? They always brought it. It was wonderful to watch. And then all of a sudden, we hit the change of the century, and it just seems like boxing is just like, I don't know what it is. It just went away or something. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you right now, though, I will stick the Mickey Ward, late Arturo Gatti trilogy against any fight I've ever seen in my life, and that includes MMA. That was boxing at its purest and its finest. Now, though, I mean, here's the big problem, Dan. We all know Manny Pacquiao. We all know Floyd Mayweather. We all know, the Klitschko's. Well, I guess you could say, Tim Bradley and Marquez. Can you name, outside of that small number of people, can you name 10 boxers outside of the ones I already mentioned? I mean, the Klitschko brothers, yeah, they've dominated the heavyweight division. Who the hell have they beat? Who have they beat in terms of, and not that these guys don't have talent, but when you see a Klitschko's fighting, the first question you're left asking yourself is who? These guys aren't known. The heavyweight division, I remember growing up, even Bruce Seldon, these guys were known. They were hyped. They were, the fights were anticipated. We all knew Mike Tyson was going to run through Bone Crusher Smith. We all knew Mike Tyson was going to have his way with Razor Ruddock. People watched, though, because they knew both fighters. Maybe it was guilt by association that the guy who was fighting Tyson was a lamb being led to slaughter, but we know who these guys were. I can't name 10 heavyweights outside of the Klitschko's. They're not promoted. They're not, and it doesn't help that there's 7,386 titles out there with every alphabet soup combination you can come with to mankind, but that's the problem with boxing. There's no name recognition.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. I know, I think, I'll be honest with you, you can agree or disagree, Jay, but the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight not happening, pretty much, I think, boxing will feel that pain of that for at least a decade.
They dropped the ball. But we're in the final minute of the program. That being said, quick recap. Those of you that missed, Renan Barão defeats Uriah Faber, knockout round one, and Jose Aldo defeats Ricardo Lamas, unanimous decision. It'll be Aldo versus Pettis date to be announced. We got more to discuss next week on the show. Hey, Dan, another great program. Thank you very much for doing it. Real quick, let's plug in Listed 9 Fight Company as we got a couple of seconds left here.
All right, hey, everybody listening today, go to Enlisted 9 Fight Company on Facebook. Follow us. We got some great things going on. We got a nice album out there. We got some great T-shirts and apparel. And just a great site to be on with Jay, myself, Curtin. Hey, go ahead and broadcast and all kinds of cool news network stuff. So follow us. We'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, that being said, it's been another great program. We thank you all very much for joining us. For Chris Weisdalt Lytle, Dan O'Brien, and Mr. Bill behind the board, I am Jay Pagliaro. We'll talk to you next Saturday here on Pull No Punches, powered by Enlisted 9 Fight Company on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
I wish I knew then what I know right now. When my parents fled, that's when it shook my ground. No source of strength now, my life wasn't clear. Cracks in the foundation, I was living in fear. Paycheck to paycheck, 3 jobs at a time.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay.